Chapter 6, Annabelle. Madame Lamar set a lovely formal supper table, Nathaniel observed. She took the head of the table and placed him at the foot. All her girls were there, except for two who were busy with clients. Catherine Delight sat next to him. She winked and giggled. Dinner was served by the maid, Rosarita, who looked like she'd never missed a meal in her life. "We're real happy to have you over," Madame Lamar said. "We were wondering if you'd ever get around to visiting." Nathaniel cleared his throat, not quite sure how to respond. "You seem to be doing well here," he said. "Yes, indeed. Rhyolite has gone places fast, and we have never been so busy. I do suspect my tattoo has brought us all luck and prosperity. I mean, the bunny rabbits, of course." He nodded absently. The fan at one end of the room circulated the air, but it was still hot. He loosened his collar. "I'm sorry to inconvenience you, Madame Lamar." "Nonsense. None of that now. You stay as long as you like. While you're here, you can look at Salome's portraits of the girls. They're all framed and hung in the hallway. We might ask you to do some tattoos, except I don't suppose you brought your equipment." "No, I'm afraid not. Say, this pot roast is delicious. I wish I could hire your cook." Later, Madame Lamar showed him to his sleeping room in the basement. She offered to let him sleep with one of the girls, but he declined. He took this opportunity to speak to her privately. "Madame Lamar, it's urgent I locate someone who arrived in town recently, in the last couple of days. Can you help me out?" She looked thoughtful. "Male or female?" "A lady. Her name is Annabelle Preen." "I suppose she wouldn't be coming around here then, though it's been known to happen. Friend of yours?" "I'm in love with her." He blurted that out without thinking, and then wondered why. "For years," he added. He could see she was thinking, making guesses. "I'll see what I can do," she said. Next morning, Sally dropped in for a visit. They sat in Madame Lamar's kitchen, taking advantage of the huge pot of coffee. "I thought you ought to know. These two burros turned up. They didn't wander into the stable, though. Couple of prospectors found them outside of Bullfrog near a little spring. They came in last night." He peered at her over the edge of his cup. "So?" He took a sip. "Is there a search party out looking for me and Bill?" "No, not yet anyway. But I heard about the burros from Mr. Hernandez. He thought I should know. He's running an item on the front page of the Herald that you two are missing." "Did you get that claim filed, like I asked?" "Right before I came over here. I told Mr. Fish you weren't really missing. You just didn't want Mr. Kramer to find you for a while. Mr. Fish said he understood. He doesn't like Mr. Kramer either. In fact, he said he thinks he's a crook. He told me something else too."
"What's that? Don't keep me on pins and needles waiting, young lady."
"I ain't no lady. Mr. Fish said he hasn't seen Mr. Kramer since last weekend. He was supposed to sign some real estate papers, but nobody can find him." Nathaniel sipped his coffee.
"That's odd. He should have been back Tuesday evening or Wednesday at the latest. I should have thought he would be snooping around, asking questions."
"No sign of him yet. Maybe that snallygaster got him."
"Snallygaster only grabs things we want to keep,"
Nathaniel said. "Annabelle checked in at the Golden Hotel," Madame Lamar told him that afternoon. "But she hasn't been around since yesterday. Nobody knows where she went. Nathaniel stopped pacing and studied the woman. He needed to go out and look for Annabel.
What else can you tell me?
Madame Lamar took another sip of her ice water with lemon. It doesn't look good, she said. The day clerk is a friend of mine and keeps a sharp eye out for people who come and go. He says Kramer came in yesterday and sat down in the lobby. It's always busy there, so he probably thought no one would notice him. After a few minutes, your Annabel came downstairs. They talked for a while, then she went away with him. She hasn't been seen since.
Dear God, the man knows she could expose him. If he thinks I'm lying out there in the desert, he'll believe she's the only living person who knows who he is. I'm afraid the man has no conscience. There's no telling what he'll do.
What will you do? He frowned.
I wonder how I found her. How did Kramer even know she was here? Come to that, where has he been the past 2 days?
Madame Lamar looked serious in turn, thinking. He probably decided to make himself scarce for a while, till he could be sure you're dead.
Yeah, but then, before the Burrows turned up, he must have discovered Annabel had arrived. He didn't waste any time contacting her.
He would have known he couldn't hide out from her for long.
You're right.
Nathaniel scratched absently at his chin.
He's too well known in Rhyolite, so he must have decided to take the initiative. But he doesn't know I'm still alive. I'm back in town. I'm going to find him.
Need any help? Madame Lamar asked. I could rustle up a couple of strong arms to back you, or you could take my Colt 44. Nathaniel gave a faint shudder.
No thanks. I once owned a gun, and it only got me in trouble. As for the strong arms, I trust more my wits. I thank you again for your hospitality, madam. I shall be on my way.
And he was quickly out the front door. He nearly knocked down a member of the Board of Trade who was on his way in. He went first to his storefront to check with Sally. He found her using his dentist chair tattooing machine to practice on rawhide. She was producing some elegant scrollwork.
I didn't say you could do that.
Won't break it, I promise. When can I do a real person? He looked over her shoulder at the rawhide. It was really nice work.
I guess it will be soon at the rate you're going. Has anyone been around?
Just the constable. He says they're planning to get up a search party tomorrow morning.
Doesn't sound like they're in much of a hurry. I guess I should let them know I'm back, but not before I have a word with Milton.
Do you know where he is?
No, but a good bet is his cabin up at the mine. I'm going there. If I don't come back, tell the constable.
Taking only his hat, he set out for the mine. He'd only gone a short way before changing his mind about going alone. He needed a witness. He stopped in at the livery stable. He found Sandy, the proprietor, sweeping out a stall.
I hear you found those 2 burros I hired,
Nathaniel said. Sandy nodded. He didn't seem too surprised to see him.
They turned up. We thought you and the Indian were dead. Not yet. Just lost the animals. You happen to see Shoshone Bill around?
Not exactly.
His burro's here, though. Found her back in her stall when I came to work in the morning. I figured Bill must have left her there, or somebody else did. If Bill's still alive, he's around, not far from his critter, Falling Star over there. He wouldn't leave her alone. You might try the other side of those big rocks out back. Sometimes he camps there. Thanks, I will. Does Bill owe you any money? For feed or board, I mean?
Sandy shrugged.
Some, but his credit's good. He always pays when he comes for his burro. He's poor as dirt, but he pays his debts. More than can be said for a lot of folks.
Nathaniel tipped his hat and headed out back. He found Bill dozing under a canvas lean-to.
I need your help, Bill, one more time.
Bill sat up and rubbed his eyes.
What for?
He said.
I'm on my way to find Mr. Kramer. There might be trouble. I'd like for you to come along as a witness. He won't try to shoot us this time because of all the miners around, but I want you there to keep an eye on things. If anything bad happens, you might have to talk to the constable. Me and the constable are old friends. Let's go.
They walked out through town toward the mine. This was the first time Nathaniel had been so close while the mill was in operation. The sound was deafening, nearly painful. He wondered how the workers could stand being there 12 hours a day. Kramer's cabin was some distance from the mill. Nathaniel didn't bother knocking. He tried the door, found it unlocked, and went in. Bill stayed outside. Kramer sat at a desk covered with legal papers with his back turned. He didn't hear Nathaniel come in until Nathaniel slammed the door. Kramer spun around. His eyes flared wide. His hands went to a desk drawer. Nathaniel stepped forward and kicked the drawer shut.
You won't need the pistol, Nathaniel said. I only came to talk.
The noise in the mill made it difficult to be heard without shouting. Kramer slumped back in the chair. After his first moment of surprise, he seemed to accept the fact that Nathaniel had returned from the dead.
What do you want of me?
He said. Nathaniel balled his fists, ready to fight.
What have you done with Annabelle?
For a moment, Kramer looked surprised again.
I haven't done anything with her. We had a nice talk at the Newton Grill yesterday. Then she said she was going to church to pray and meditate and think things over. I haven't seen her since.
Something told Nathaniel the man was telling the truth, at least as far as it went. He'd first suspected Kramer might have forced Annabelle to go with them, but now that didn't seem likely.
Think what things over? Did she know I was supposed to be lost in the desert? Yeah, the Herald was on the street by then. Don't ask me what she needed to mull over. I never understood the mind of a woman.
Suddenly, Kramer got to his feet and stepped closer. Nathaniel first thought that he was about to fight, but oddly, tears made the man's eyes glitter.
How could you do it, Nathaniel? My own business partner. How could you plot to run off with my wife? Do you blame me for taking satisfaction any way I could? I was humiliated. Can't you understand my wanting to kill you? Can't you understand anything?
Nathaniel slumped.
No, Milton, I can't say as how I blame you. Although you had no cause to try to kill Shoshone Bill along with me. I'll leave you be for now until I find Annabelle. Maybe we'll talk some more later.
He turned to go. At the door, he looked back, half expecting Kramer to be going for his gun again, but the man only sagged in his chair.
By the way, don't bother trying to file a claim on that strike. It's already done. Of course, you could buy us out. Bill gets half the proceeds.
Kramer only stared at him as he walked out.
I might still need you, he told Bill. Will you stay with me for a while?
Nathaniel had a bad feeling, a sense that something could yet go wrong.
Sure.
Bill fell in step beside him. They hiked back to town. Nathaniel headed first for the tattoo parlor. Sally was taking a nap in the heat of the afternoon, but she jumped up when he and Bill entered.
Any ice water left?
Nathaniel asked. She went to the cooler. The man delivered ice this morning. She poured 3 glasses. Nathaniel took his time drinking his down. Bill just sipped. Nathaniel told Sally about his conversation with Kramer.
I forgot to ask how he found Annabelle so fast, he concluded.
She picked up a newspaper from the table. I guess you didn't see yesterday's Herald. She opened to the back page and showed him a small advertisement which she'd circled in red. Milton Preen, I am at the Golden Hotel. If you are in town, please call upon me. Annabelle. Nathaniel nodded slowly.
So that's it. Simple enough. I expect she had no idea what kind of risks she was taking with a man so dangerous. Milton says she's over at one of the churches, perhaps waiting to see if I turn up dead in the desert. Poor Annabelle. There are two churches in this town, the Presbyterian and the Catholic. 40 or 50 saloons, but only two churches. Thank God. I'll try the Presbyterian first. That's closer, over by the railroad station.
While you're going there, Sally said, I'll go on over to the Catholic in case she's there. If she is, I'll tell her you're on the way. He could see nothing wrong with that.
Good idea. And thanks, Sally. Let's get going.
Sally picked up her handbag and all three left together. It took only a few minutes for Nathaniel and Bill to reach the Presbyterian church. The front door was closed, so they went around back to the pastor's residence. Nathaniel knocked, waited, and was about to knock again when the door opened. The aroma of cabbage floated from within. A middle-aged man in shirt sleeves stared at him. Yes? Who is it, William? A woman's voice called from inside. Visitors, dear, he shouted over his shoulder. I expect it'll be only a moment.
Are you the pastor here?
Nathaniel asked. I am the Reverend Noble. Services are over for today, but if I may be of assistance.
I'm Nathaniel Strange, a merchant of the city, and I only wish a moment of your time, sir. I'm looking for a young lady. It's urgent I locate her. I was told she might be here.
The Reverend glanced backward, then stepped outside, closing the door behind him. You're that tattoo person, I believe. I can't say I approve, but then I suppose you're about as respectable as anyone else around Rhyolite. This weekend, I'm to perform a marriage between a miner and a lady of the night. Some of the proper ladies of the town heard about it. They threatened to boycott my church. So I'm writing a sermon about Mary Magdalene for this Sunday. Believe me, it will be a long one. What is this young lady's name? The one you're looking for.
Her name is Mrs. Annabelle Preen, lately of Baltimore, Maryland, and Pennsylvania.
The Reverend stared, measuring him. I thought as much. She was here yesterday. Would you be her husband?
No, sir, just an old friend.
The Reverend nodded, apparently thinking that over. She was here to ask for asylum. No one ever came to me asking for asylum before. I asked her what she needed asylum from. She said it wasn't that the law was after her or that she was in immediate danger. She did say she wished to avoid contact with her estranged husband, who is somewhere in town. But it was more that she needed asylum from the world for a day or two until she could sort things out, as she put it. She refused to be more specific.
You didn't let her remain here?
We really don't have room unless she was to sleep in the pews, and my wife didn't think it would be proper. Of course, had I thought her in real danger, it would have been different. As it was, I suggested she try the Catholic Church. She's not Catholic herself, she said, but I told her Father Ryan is a tolerant fella, and he has more space. The Reverend blinked several times and glanced over his shoulder at the closed door. She's not actually in danger, I hope.
She might be, but I don't doubt you did the right thing, Reverend. Thanks.
He spun on his heel and walked away, Bill following. The Catholic Church was 3 blocks west. As they were crossing Magnolia Street, they were beset by the roar of an engine and a klaxon blast from behind. They both jumped out of the way as a huge auto raced past, carrying 5 passengers, 1 lady and 4 men, all holding their hats.
One of those Pope Toledos, Nathaniel said. Damn nuisance, if you ask me. That machine must be going 20 miles an hour. Can do maybe 40, Bill commented. Get you up to Goldfield in a hurry, you bet.
Nathaniel sighed.
I suppose so, but I hope to God it never replaces the horse and buggy. Let's walk faster and get up to that church in a hurry. I want to see Annabelle.
They walked faster. It was getting late in the day. Nathaniel was surprised to find the front doors still open. The priest was puttering about some potted plants just inside the entrance.
Father Ryan?
The man straightened up and turned. That would be me. And you are probably Mr. Strange. The priest looked a lot like Reverend Noble, except for his black suit and collar. Nathaniel wondered how he could wear them in this heat.
They must have told you to expect me. The 2 ladies, I mean. May I see them?
You could, except they're not here. They both left a while ago. The young lady came in and spoke to Mrs. Preen for several minutes. Then they both departed. Mrs. Preen said to inform you she was on her way to visit her husband. Nathaniel turned to stare at Bill, as if to confirm he'd heard right.
She wouldn't wait for me? Why is she going there? Has she taken leave of her senses?
He turned back to the priest, who only stared back at him.
Thank you, Reverend. I mean, Father. Thank you for your time. I won't keep you any longer.
He turned to go. She said one other thing. Father Ryan said,
Oh, what was that?
That there's no need for you to follow her, and she's not afraid of him. She will be fine. She tried to tell the girl to stay behind, but she insisted on going with her.
Thanks for helping, Father. I'll remember to make a donation to your church.
He walked quickly away, Bill trying to keep up. They headed back toward the mine. By now, it was nearly time for the shift change. Nathaniel was tired and depressed. All this running back and forth in the heat was wearing him out. For a moment, he wondered why he felt so sad, then realized it was because Annabelle hadn't waited for him. But the sadness was overpowered by his sense of dread.
Mr. Strange, wait up.
He stopped short at the sound of the familiar voice with its heavy accent. He turned to see a group of 6 miners heading for town. One of them separated from the group and came lumbering across the street. He was the size and shape of a grizzly.
Omar,
Nathaniel said,
glad to see you. How are you? I am being more than good. I heard you lost in desert, maybe dead. I once was lost, but now I'm found. We're in a bit of a hurry. Did you need something? No. I just want to find out if you coming to my wedding Sunday. Your wedding? Do you mean at the Presbyterian church? Are you the man marrying Kathy? Yup, is me.
Omar was beaming.
I have great good fortune lately. My old boss moved to Colorado. He write and say he wants to hire me for mine foreman. He's lots more money, so I can afford to get married. And I meet very nice girl who love me. Come to Colorado. Me, I'm Catholic, but Kathy wants to get married in Protestant church. What the hell, I say. Maybe we get married twice.
Nathaniel couldn't help but laughing. He seized Omar's hand and pumped it. Grateful the man didn't squeeze any harder.
Congratulations, Omar. Best of luck. I'm definitely coming to your wedding. Sally, too, even if she doesn't like churches.
Omar grinned and continued on his way. For a moment, Nathaniel had considered asking him to come with them to the mine, but he decided that wasn't necessary. Milton wouldn't try anything stupid with so many witnesses. The stamping mill was still running full blast. Nathaniel decided he was actually getting used to the sound. Maybe a person could get used to anything. On the way to Kramer's cabin, he asked Bill if he'd ever met Omar before this.
Sure, I played cards with him last week. He already invited me to wedding. He said he wanted to ask you too. I guess I'm the last to know. He say something about Mr. Kramer.
Nathaniel stopped.
Omar said something about Kramer? What was that? A bad deal. Kramer, one of the mine bosses. But nobody like him. He's bad medicine, bad luck. I figured that. So what? So last week he go down in the mine shaft. Say he want to look at gold vein himself. Bad medicine for bad luck man to go down in mine. Nobody likes Mr. Kramer. First time he ever go underground. Could bring bad luck. Leastways, that's what miners think. What sort of bad luck?
Bill shrugged.
Maybe even cave in, or maybe pinch off gold vein. Nobody wants him going underground.
Nathaniel nodded without comment.
Let's go, Bill. We're nearly there.
The sun was setting, but there was no light on in the cabin. He hesitated a moment as he spotted two women over near the mine elevator, both standing with their backs towards him. Then some miners got off the elevator, and he realized the women were waiting for their men to come off shift. He wondered if perhaps Annabelle and Sally had not yet arrived, but he had a bad feeling, as if something was wrong that he should have noticed sooner. It wasn't dark yet, so there was nothing strange with finding no light behind the cabin window. Maybe Kramer and Annabelle were having a quiet conversation. Nathaniel listened, but there was nothing to hear other than the noise of the mill.
Better wait outside,
He told Bill.
I'll call you if I need you.
Bill nodded and shrugged. Nathaniel went down the narrow slope to Kramer's cabin. He stopped outside the door and listened. Still nothing. No sound of argument or conversation. He knocked 3 times. No response. He was about to knock again, but changed his mind. He turned the knob and entered.
My God,
He said. Kramer lay on the floor in a pool of blood. Sally was standing near him. Annabelle was seated in a chair, white and still as a marble sculpture. On the floor was a nickel-plated revolver. Nathaniel remembered seeing it once before in Sally's handbag. He knelt down in Kramer's blood and put a hand on the man's neck to feel for a pulse. Kramer opened his mouth.
the little bitch shot me,
He said. Then he died. Nathaniel rose, scooped up the gun, and put it in his pocket. She asked him for a divorce, Sally said. He got real mean. He was going to hurt her.
Shut up.
Nathaniel said.
Don't say any more. I don't want to hear it. When the constable gets here, I want you to say absolutely nothing. You understand? Tell him nothing.
She looked up at him and nodded slowly. He thought her face expressed more sadness than fear. He stepped outside the door.
Bill, you better go find the superintendent. I think the office over there has a telephone. Tell him to call the constable.
Bill glanced inside the door. He didn't ask questions. He turned and headed for the office. The mine super arrived a few minutes later. By then, Nathaniel had got the 2 women out of the cabin. Annabelle still had not spoken. She looked about ready to faint. The super looked things over and got both of them away from there, down to the office. Nathaniel leaned against the outside wall of the cabin. He wished he had a stiff drink. He stood there for 20 minutes, just staring. Finally, the officer of the law arrived, driving his Winton automobile. Bill rode with him.
What's going on here?
The constable demanded. Nathaniel stood up straight and held out his arms to be handcuffed.
I surrender, officer. I just killed Jedediah Kramer, alias Milton Breen. The weapon is in my pocket.
Chapter 7, Jail. The next day, Edmund J. Fish came to see him. The jailer left them alone together in the cell.
How is Sally?
Nathaniel asked.
They won't let me see her, or Annabelle either. That's because they're both witnesses. They're fine. Mrs. Preen is staying with Sally in back of your shop. I guess they're both pretty upset, but they'll get through it okay.
Nathaniel nodded.
What about the townsfolk? Are they going to lynch me?
Fish gave a loud snort.
That's a good one. That fellow Kramer was almost universally despised. Seems like he's managed to cheat half the folks in town at one time or another. The miners especially hated him. He was trying to break the union. When the boss of the IWW heard about it last night, he stood for all drinks on him. What I came to tell you is that we got together and hired you a lawyer. I don't need a lawyer. You're getting one anyway, whether you want him or not. He's the best man in the district, Senator Stewart.
Nathaniel rubbed his chin.
I've heard of him. He's retired from Congress, practices law out of Bullfrog. You've probably seen his house, the big abode, the big adobe. He'll be along sometime this afternoon. He says he wants to interview the witnesses first. It sounds expensive. We took up a collection. Anyway, he's giving us a special rates. He didn't like Kramer either.
Nathaniel got up and stared out the single barred window.
You're going to a lot of trouble for someone new in town, Mr. Fish. I don't know how to thank you. I'd do the same for anyone who got rid of Kramer. Before I leave, before you go, I'd like to ask one additional favor, or rather two. There's a matter of the mine claim. I'm calling it the Shoshone Bill claim. I'd like you to sell it for me. Sally can give you the papers. Half the proceeds go directly to Bill to do with as he pleases. There's also some raw ore full of free gold. Some in the bank and some in my desk at the shop. It's worth maybe $100. If you could sell it for expenses, sure, I'll turn the cash over to Sally. She seems a capable girl. You're lucky to have her as a niece.
Nathaniel opened his mouth to correct him, then shut it. Fish wasn't quite finished. He pulled an envelope from a pocket.
I'm not supposed to do this. In fact, it's strictly illegal. But what the hell? This is from Mrs. Preen.
He handed over the letter. Nathaniel stared at it.
Thank you, Mr. Fish. I was hoping I'd be able to speak to her at least once. Now I suppose I'll likely hang first. Thank you again for everything. Plead insanity,
Fish advised.
or self-defense. No jury will convict you.
Then he rattled the bars to summon the jailer. When he was gone, Nathaniel sat down to read. Dear Nathaniel, I've done you great wrong, as I've done Milton wrong. I owe you more than apologies. If I could change any single decision of my past, none of this would have happened. I thought you were a criminal in Baltimore, and so abandoned you. I see now I'm worst of all. Mr. Fish has cautioned me about putting certain things in writing, lest this fall into the wrong hands. Therefore, I must hold back. But I wish to tell you I take full responsibility for what has occurred. I should never have agreed to leave Milton and go with you in the first place. It was wrong and dishonorable. Not that I had any affection remaining for Milton. He was a liar and a cheat, stole my money, and was seeing other women. When I discovered he had arranged for me to receive nothing from his estate, I had mixed feelings. On the one hand, it was an example of his cruelty and meanness. On the other hand, I felt I had betrayed him and deserved nothing. Now I have betrayed you as well. I've spoken with Senator Stewart. He has begged me to remain silent until your trial. He even hints it may not be necessary for me to testify. I do not understand these legal matters, but will follow his instructions as long as he assures me they are in your best interest. However, I swear to you, Nathaniel, I will not allow you to be convicted. If events do not proceed as well as the senator promises, I will speak out and tell the truth. Whatever happens, be assured of my love for you. I see no possibility that we can be together again, but I will think of you always. A. There was a second slip of paper in the envelope. It was in a childish scrawl. Dear Uncle Nathaniel, that's what everybody thinks you are, except for Madame Lamar, who knows better. So I might as well call you that. I did my first tattoo today on one of the girls. It was a red rose, Salome. Nathaniel carefully hid both letters under his mattress. He was almost as touched by Sally's letter as by Annabelle's. He fretted and hoped Annabelle wouldn't speak the truth, at least not at the trial. He hoped she wouldn't do that to Sally. The last thing he wanted was to save his own neck if it meant Annabelle's betrayal of Sally. Maybe he could get Mr. Fish to send one or both of them out of the state before his trial came up. He flopped down on his bunk and stared at the ceiling. At least it was cool here in the jail. In the afternoon, the senator came by. He didn't say much except to ask if Nathaniel needed anything. Nathaniel asked for a change of clothes. He still had Milton's dried blood on his pants. The senator promised to send over a new suit. He'll be needing it for tomorrow morning, he said, for the arraignment. They're sending over a circuit judge from the county seat. Look, just give me a confession to sign. There doesn't have to be a trial. None of that. You're pleading not guilty. I don't want to hear anything from you about what happened or what you think happened, but you might be right about not needing a trial. I have interviewed the witnesses, Mrs. Preen and Miss Jezebel, as well as your friend Bill. It's an open and shut case. Look, whatever they told you, never mind what they told me. Just keep your mouth shut unless I tell you otherwise. Think you can do that? He could see the senator would brook no argument. Nathaniel could not have explained why, but he trusted the man. He nodded and shook hands with him. The arraignment was at 8 a.m. Nathaniel wore his new suit. It was tight around the shoulders, but he guessed it looked all right. The judge used the miners' union building for a courtroom. Nathaniel had hoped to see Annabelle or Sally, but they weren't present. He was surprised to see Madame Lamar among the few spectators. He supposed Sally might have asked her to attend and report what went on. After the legal preliminaries, the assistant district attorney read off the charges. It was a short list: murder in the first degree. How does the prisoner plead? Judge O'Brien asked. Nathaniel thought he looked interested, as if this was a break in a usually dull routine. Standing, Senator Stewart said,
The accused pleads not guilty.
"Good enough," the judge said. "Any objection if we start the trial tomorrow?"
Yes, Your Honor, Stewart replied. I have requested certain documents by special courier from Baltimore, Maryland. They are essential for an effective defense. I expect to receive them by the end of the week. I therefore request a postponement until next Monday.
The DA got to his feet.
Your Honor, I fail to see why this is necessary. We have 2 or 3 eyewitnesses, and the prisoner has admitted shooting Kramer. I don't understand what documents could possibly be relevant. Your Honor, relevancy will become clear,
Stewart began, but the judge cut him off with a rap of his gavel.
Never mind that. Continuance is granted till next Monday. I'm taking your word for it about the documents, Stewart. I know you don't engage in skullduggery. Anything else? Yes, Your Honor. I'm requesting my client be released on bail. I'll see to it personally. He's in court next Monday.
Nathaniel turned to stare at Stewart, wondering how he could be so confident that Nathaniel would show up.
Request granted.
The judge hardly gave the DA time to raise his hand.
Bail is set at $500. The accused will not leave town and will have no contact with the witnesses. That means no contact, personally or otherwise. Court is held over till next Monday, same time.
He rapped his gavel 3 times. Nathaniel said,
I don't have $500. Don't worry about it,
the senator said.
Madame Lamar's putting up the cash. She says you can stay at her place till the trial. How do you know I won't hop the first freight train out of town? 2 reasons, Annabelle and Sally. Now come on, I'll buy you a drink.
Back in Madame Lamar's basement room, Nathaniel wondered if he might have been happier in jail. At least over there, he knew where he stood. Anyhow, it wasn't far away. The Rhyolite calaboose was conveniently located at the edge of the red light district. He paced back and forth, same as if he were in a cell. He desperately wanted to see Annabelle. He wanted to talk to her. Back at the mine, neither had said a word to the other, except when Nathaniel got the 2 women out of the cabin. She had looked ghastly. He'd recognized her at once, despite the 10 years since he'd last seen her, but she had changed. Her face was pale and her hair straight. If he hadn't known better, he would have guessed she'd spent most of those years in prison herself. She never should have come here. He needed to talk to Sally as well, if only to make sure she knew what to say at the trial. If he was going back to prison or the gallows, he must make some provision for her future. She was too young to make her own way, though she might think otherwise. Edmund J. Fish came to bring him a change of clothes. Nathaniel's first question was about the senator.
What the devil does he think he's up to? He knows I admitted to shooting Kramer. Is he going to try to prove otherwise? I won't have him trying to pin it on Sally.
Fish gave a shrug.
He hasn't confided in me. He seems to know what he's doing, though. Trust him. By the way, you don't have to stay here. You're free to go out as long as you don't leave town and don't speak to the witnesses. I wouldn't discuss the case with anyone else either. If I can't go home, I have no desire to go anywhere else. Did you arrange to sell that gold ore like I asked? I did better than that. I showed it to an investor from back east. He paid $300 for the quartz and made an offer on the claim, $10,000.
Nathaniel gave a low whistle.
That's a fortune. I hope you agreed. I need your okay. Come on down to my office tomorrow morning, and I'll have you sign the papers. I'll do that. I'm still giving half the Shoshone bill in cash. I guess I'll put the rest in the bank for the time being. I'll have a certified check ready for you.
He turned to leave. Nathaniel needed to ask another favor and wasn't sure how to go about it. If Bill were called to the stand, he could ruin everything.
I need to see Bill, illegal or not. I have to talk to him before the trial, just for a few minutes. I won't be denied on this, Mr. Fish. Can you arrange a meeting?
Fish gave him a cool look.
I can see you're serious. Well, it wouldn't be the first time I've done something slightly illegal for a client. Just pretend you never mentioned it to me. I'll see what I can do.
Somewhere upstairs, Nathaniel heard the squeak of bed springs. Later in the evening, Sally showed up.
What are you doing here? If they find out you saw me before the trial, they could put you in jail.
She shrugged. Wouldn't it be the first time I done broke the law? He couldn't help grinning. Those were almost the same words Fish had used. At the same time, he wondered if she had any idea how much danger she was in.
I hear you've been doing some business at my tattoo parlor.
Our parlor? I've been working some. A lot of the miners like getting tattooed by a girl, even though I'm not as good as you. Don't worry, you get 1/3 of the profit. He nodded solemnly.
Sounds fair. Listen, Sally, I don't want you to see me again before the trial. But as long as you're here, I want to make sure you understand what to say if you're called to the stand. I hope you won't be, but
Annabelle wants me to tell you how sorry she is. Sally broke in. She said to say she's sorry for thinking you were guilty back in Baltimore. And she says she never should have treated you as she did, even if you were guilty, which you weren't.
she told you to say that? Well, you can tell her for me that I never blamed her for anything, especially not for thinking I was guilty. I hope I can speak to her before they hang me.
That Senator Stewart don't think they will. But listen, Nathaniel, that Mr. Kramer or Preen or whatever his name, he was real mean. When I told Annabelle you were alive and on your way to see her, nothing would do but she set out to see Kramer first. She said she wanted to settle things once and for all before you came. Mr. Kramer was surprised to see her. He wasn't expecting me to be with her either. He said, "What are you doing with Nathaniel's little doxy?" is what he said. But Annabelle didn't pay no attention to that. She told him to his face he was a liar, a thief, and a coward. She said she wanted a divorce.
She said that straight out like that. What did Milton have for an answer?
His face turned might now purple. He started yelling about money, said something like, "You'll never get a dime from me, you bitch." Annabelle tried to say she didn't care a fig about the money, but he wouldn't listen. He said she was trying to ruin him, send him to jail for insurance fraud, I think he meant. Then he got so mad, he put his hands around her neck.
Stop,
Nathaniel said.
I don't need to hear anymore. You mustn't tell any of that in court. You hear me? Just say you don't remember. It all happened so quickly and you were so shocked you fainted. Understand? You don't remember anything that happened.
She seemed to think about that for a moment, then nodded. Okay, Nathaniel, if that's what y'all want, I just can't recall. After that, she spent some time showing him her sketch pad and her latest drawings. Next morning, he kept his appointment with Fish, who said,
Those quartz samples are not really worth $300. That would be a fair yield for a ton of ore. The buyer wanted to sweeten the deal, purchasing your claim. These money men from the East like to throw their weight around in the form of dollars, but it does look like good ore. There's lots of free gold in that crystal. If there's much more of it out there, the mine could be worth millions. Then again, maybe not. 10,000 is a good price. I wasn't complaining.
Nathaniel signed the papers and accepted the check in a plain envelope.
I'm taking this right to the bank. I found Shoshone Bill,
Fish said.
he says you can meet him this evening in a little adobe out behind the livery. He'll be there about sunset. I guess you could deliver his share of that check. I'll do that. Thank you, Mr. Fish. You should take my advice and invest your share in Rhyolite real estate.
Nathaniel wasn't thinking about real estate on his way to the bank. He was thinking only of Annabelle. In the few minutes he'd seen her at Kramer's cabin, he noticed how much she'd changed. Of course, he recognized her at once, but she looked thin and drawn, as if under some long time strain. It was hardly a good time to talk. He wondered if he might write her a letter. Of course, there was a risk it might be intercepted, which could make everything a lot worse. Then again, thinking about it, he wasn't sure he would even know what to say. He decided to wait. At the bank, the teller looked at the amount of his check and personally escorted him to Mr. Cook's office. The receptionist announced him, and he went in.
Ah, Mr. Strange.
Cook rose to extend his hand.
I heard about the unfortunate incident at the mine. I'm sure you'll come out well at the trial. Senator Stewart is the best. This isn't the first shooting he's handled in the Bullfrog District. Thanks, Mr. Cook. I appreciate it. I just wanted to negotiate this certified check.
He passed it over. Mr. Cook held it to the light.
Yes, of course. I signed this check myself yesterday. The teller was just being cautious. Did you want it all in cash, sir? No, just half. The other half deposited to my account. Certainly.
Cook quickly scrawled a note.
Please take this back to our Mr. Sims, the teller.
Then he leaned back in his chair and gave Nathaniel a searching look.
Tell me, Mr. Strange, were you perhaps planning an investment? Perhaps purchasing property in Rhyolite?
Nathaniel gave a short laugh.
Well, sir, that would depend on the outcome of my trial, wouldn't it? I'm sure it will be favorable. The only reason I bring up the subject is my role as financial advisor. This is an ethical bank, and I don't like to see my customers making uncautious investments. Uncautious? Are you hinting that buying property in Rhyolite might be risky?
Mr. Cook gave him a polite smile.
No, I didn't say that. Only that the realty prices might be getting somewhat inflated. Now, this is just between you and me. I had a conversation yesterday at the 66 Club with an auditor who's been going over the books at the mine. It appears we have not been shipping out as much ore lately as we had hoped. The early predictions may have been optimistic. Now, I really shouldn't be discussing this with you at all, but I have a feeling you're worried about something, Mr. Cook.
Cook waved a hand.
Now, don't go jumping to conclusions, Mr. Strange. Cook's bank is sound. Your money is safe here. But then there was a San Francisco quake 2 years ago, which siphoned off a lot of investment cash. There was also the panic last year, and now problems with the mine. All I'm saying is, Consider carefully your options before investing. That's all.
Nathaniel rose.
Thanks again, Mr. Cook. I'll remember your advice.
That afternoon, after concluding his business, Nathaniel took a plunge in one of the town's 3 swimming pools. He thought it might be his last chance. At sunset, he found Shoshone Bill down at his adobe. The building was likely one of the first ever constructed in the town, which made it about 4 years old. It was looking run down, with peeling stucco and cracked window panes. There was no furniture at all on the dirt floor, and yet it was swept clean. Bill was sitting on the floor, whittling something with his bowie knife. A candle burned on a shelf.
How you doing, Bill? Okay. I want to go down to Tucson to see my brother. The constable says I can't leave till after your trial. They gonna hang you? I hope not, but you never know. I came to ask you a favor. But first, here's your share of that claim. I named it the Shoshone Bill Mine.
He passed across the plain envelope stuffed with banknotes and sat down on the floor. Bill opened the envelope and looked inside.
How much? That's $5,000.
Bill nodded and slipped the envelope inside his shirt. He resumed his whittling.
Lot of money. Me and my brother could buy a ranch. What kind of favor you want?
Nathaniel shook his head.
The favor doesn't have anything to do with the money. That's yours, even if you don't want to do it. Okay.
Bill whittled and waited.
It's about the trial. What I want you to say. Have you called to the stand?
Bill waited in silence for more.
I want you to tell them you heard a shot right after I walked into the cabin.
Bill whittled.
Couldn't hear nothing. That stamping mill was so loud. I know, but I want you to tell them that anyway, Bill. It's important.
Bill thought about that. From the weak light of the candle, Nathaniel could make out the shape of what he was carving. Bill had whittled a block of wood into the shape of a coiled rattler.
Panamint Joe says only white men have to lie. Who's Panamint Joe? Head of our band.
Bill looked up suddenly.
You come see Panamint Joe. He says it's okay. I'll do it. What? Right now? Where does he live? He live over in Beatty, but now spend a lot of time here in Rhyolite. Come on, let's go.
He tossed aside his carving, sheathed his knife, and rose to his feet without effort. Nathaniel followed him out the door. They walked for half a mile through the desert to another adobe closely resembling the one they just left. Dim light glowed through the windows. Bill led the way, but stopped some distance from the door. Puzzled, Nathaniel stopped as well.
Aren't we going in? You wait,
Bill said. They stood and waited. Minutes ticked by. Then a boy came out the door. Nathaniel wondered how he'd known they were standing there. The boy, in soft tones, said something to Bill in Indian.
Joe says we come inside,
Bill said. They went in. This place at least had some furniture, a table and chairs, a couple of sleeping cots. An oil lamp furnished the light. Apparently, electricity hadn't yet got this far. Panamint Joe sat in a straight-backed chair against the wall. He was oddly well-dressed, with a necktie and vest and striped shirt. He gave Nathaniel a once-over, then said something to Bill. Bill said,
Joe can talk English good, but he say he don't want to tonight. He wants me to translate. He can understand you okay, though.
Both he and Bill remained standing. Nathaniel cleared his throat, feeling awkward.
I'm happy to meet you, Joe. Bill tells me you're an important person.
Joe stared at him.
Bill tells me I need to ask your permission For him to tell a lie.
Using a sharp tone, Joe said something quickly to Bill.
What kind of lie?
Bill translated.
Tell him
Nathaniel said.
it's not a bad lie. It's not to hurt anyone. You just told him yourself,
Bill said. Nathaniel saw that Joe was still staring at him, waiting. Briefly, he explained what he wanted Bill to do. When he'd finished, Joe looked at Bill and said a few soft words.
He says you're crazy,
Bill said.
He say you want them to hang you?
Nathaniel said,
No, but it's because I don't want them to get the idea that Sally might have done it. It was her gun. I'm trying to protect her. She's too young for prison.
Again, Joe spoke in low tones.
Sounds like Sally done it, Bill said. You in love with her? Gonna marry her?
Nathaniel laughed in spite of himself.
No, she's too young. Anyway, I want to marry someone else. He still think you crazy,
Bill said after Joe muttered a few words.
He want to know how old Sally? About 16, I think,
Nathaniel said.
Not too young, Bill said. You bring her over. Maybe Joe marry her.
Nathaniel coughed. He wasn't sure if the Indian was making fun of him.
I guess that's up to her. Well, what about it? Is it all right if Bill tells one little lie for me in court?
Here, Panamint Joe seemed to gather himself on his wooden chair, as if about to pass judgment from a throne. He looked first at Bill, then at Nathaniel. Then he spoke to Bill in clipped sentences for nearly a full minute. He stopped, looked again at Nathaniel, and waited. Bill said,
Telling lies weakens a man. He says you did right to come to him for guidance. He says, if I say what you want in the white man's court, it won't be me telling the lie. It will be you. It will be your lie, not mine. It could weaken your soul and cause great sickness. And so you must be sure you want this lie. You must be ready to own it. You must find out first if you are truly ready to tell this lie, which may cause your hanging.
Nathaniel felt thirsty.
How do I find out if I'm ready?
He asked. Bill said,
You come back tomorrow night, sunset. You do sweat lodge. Sweat lodge? What the hell is that?
Bill gave a wide grin.
You find out.